Well, normally I would say let's give some more people a few more minutes, but what I really want to do is I want to get started so everyone has time to ask lots of questions. If you're here for Amazon SageMaker Studio Lab, you are in the right place. So welcome, and we were announced this morning, so the reason for the light room is I think we just got on the agenda because we were under embargo up until 8:30 this morning. So thank you so much for showing up. So let me start off by saying I'm Michelle Monclova. I am the Principal Product Manager for SageMaker Studio Lab, and I'm going to be joined by Emily Weber, who is a solution architect. She will be doing the demo for us a little bit later to show you the power of this tool. How many people, show of hands, and it's hard for me to see, heard the announcement this morning with Swami about SageMaker Studio Lab? Okay, a few people didn't, so great. So basically, it is a new service for our ML learners, people who are just learning ML. We want to provide an environment for them to get going with as little friction as possible. And we're going to get into the details about what we offer and how we offer it. Oh, and one more quick thing is all these slides will be available for download later on, as well as I will remind you at the end to please take the survey. Okay, so I want to start off with our vision and why we're doing this. We, AWS, want to make ML and data science as accessible as possible. And this is not a new vision for us. This year alone, we have trained over 1 million people in ML with courses like AWS Machine Learning University, or our Dive into Deep Learning, or we have courses on Coursera. And over 1 million people in 2021 alone have already taken those courses. We've also trained roughly 140,000 people with our Deep Racer project in over 150 countries. And you might have also heard this morning announcement about us having a $10 million scholarship to bring ML skills into the underserved communities. So there's lots of things we're doing to really make accessibility with ML important, and AWS Studio Lab is another step in that direction. Oh, I should use this thing. Okay, so here are a couple of stats that we thought were pretty interesting. Yes, we want to make it more accessible, but if you look at these statistics, you'll see that there's a huge skill gap in the market today. Quant Hub suggested there's 250,000 jobs that were left unfilled in 2020. And I just did a LinkedIn search not too long ago. It was 122,000 job openings on LinkedIn for data scientists. And that's not to mention other jobs that require some machine learning skills, but not called data scientists. There's another stat here for VentureBeat saying that roughly 13% of all ML projects even make it to production. So why do we tell you all these things? There's a lot of work to be done. And we think that machine learning and data science is one of the most transformational technologies of our generation. It was very pivotal in the pandemic we've been dealing with, as it's going to be very pivotal for the climate change, for monitoring and diagnosing it. So this is something we really want to make sure we're helping, do our part to fill that skill gap. So how are people learning today? So today you have a lot of people who are taking online courses, or maybe you have courses right now are being offered in universities at an alarming rate. They're being added, which is fantastic. You also have blog posts. We happen to have Towards Data Science is one of our favorites. And you have a lot of people like myself who, while they've been technical for most of their careers, they're getting retooled into machine learning. And they're doing that with some on-the-job training. Maybe the company is offering some hackathons and the like. And many people, of course, are also learning with the open source project Jupyter Lab. Oops, wrong button. But what do people want when it comes to learning ML? So the way we thought about this is we broke into 3 separate categories. One is the academics. And academics would be people who are in university or people who are teaching at universities. They are trying to get the basic theory of machine learning and data science and learn the basics around Python and R. Developers, or people who are maybe already in role who want to retool themselves. Of course, they also want to learn, it's a little bit of an echo from me, they also want to learn Python and R and also practice with their own corporate data, perhaps. And then you have your real data scientists as well. They're pushing the envelope. I'm also getting feedback now on the sound. Perfect. Feedback? Anyone else? David? Thank you. And data scientists who are pushing the envelope with their own data science communities, and they want to try some new things. What all of these different groups have in common is they all want their own environment to play with, to play in and experiment with their different machine models. And that's where we come in. What do they actually need? We jotted down like these handful of things here. Number one is people who are using Jupyter Notebook today, by show of hands. Anyone using Jupyter Notebooks today? A few of us? Good. Well, Jupyter Notebook folks, they like it. They're going to love Jupyter Lab, which is a little bit more robust. It's more flexible and more powerful. For people who, they want to be easy to get started. And I know that every time a website asks for a credit card, there's a little bit of a pause. Maybe you don't even have a credit card in some places. So we want to remove that friction and make it completely free. And if you have a valid email address, make it that easy. And not bother the person with cloud infrastructure setup or setting up IAM policies. Remove all of that away from getting started on just learning data science. You also want some satisfactory compute. So if you're just learning or you're experimenting, you don't need the best CPU and GPU, but you want it to be good enough so that it's not frustrating. So we think that good fits there for CPU would be our T3 extra large, which offers 16 gigs of RAM. And for GPU, we'll have our G4D, which is also extra large, also 16 gigs of RAM. And when we say people need time to code, most of these online courses take weeks, months to do. You're not going to get it done in a day. You're not going to get it done in one user session. So we give people 15 gigs of their own personal space where they can save their projects, shut down their laptop, and return the next day, or return immediately if they'd like, and pick up where they left off. We also know that people, if they're creating code and maybe they're working with a team, they want to have good code management. So we've integrated with Git, which is an open source code manager. And we also know that these folks want a supportive community because everyone's learning together, and these data science communities all feed off of each other, and they're loaning each other code notebooks so they can build on top of them. So what better place than GitHub that has over 44 million developers as of a couple of weeks ago, that stat came out. And then you also want to have full support for shell commands so you can do some more powerful things with your terminal access. So if you take all these things that we think data scientists need based upon us being customer obsessed and asking, we came up with Studio Lab, SageMaker Studio Lab. So like I mentioned earlier, here is a free service. You create an account with just an email address, no credit card. You have 15 gigs of space. And we will give you a user session for CPU of 12 hours or GPU for 4 hours. At the end of your user session, we're constantly saving in the background. At the end of your user session, we will save your session, so when you come back, you can pick up where you left off. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, you have access to Git and GitHub. And most importantly is if you're done with your experimentation or you want to go to the next level and start using some of the functionality in SageMaker itself, we have a migration path for you to do so. Speaking of SageMaker, who is familiar with SageMaker in this room? Just a couple of people. Okay, so SageMaker is our flagship ML platform, and it really helps you with the entire process of what you need to do for data science. All the way from preparing your data, to building your models, to training and refining your models, as well as deploying, managing, and monitoring. We offer robust functionality in each one of these areas, which is fantastic for people who are deploying models and they're trying to do this for a living. But for people who are just starting out, this can be overwhelming. And that's why we have SageMaker Studio Lab, which is people who just want to learn the fundamentals before they worry about the entire process. So here is a picture that pretty much simplifies the entire process. You start off by requesting a SageMaker Studio Lab account. And I want to let everyone know in this room that if you are registered for reInvent and you're here, you will get automatic approval to have an account. And once you have that account, you are immediately given a project, and that project is where you can run your notebooks, view your notebooks, and even edit them. To run your notebooks, you get a chance to pick CPU or GPU, like I mentioned earlier, and away you go, view, edit your notebooks, and have your integration. Like the stopwatch shows there, your user session will end after 4 hours or 12 hours, in which case you can come right back and log back in if you're still working. And then also, like the picture shows, you can also migrate to SageMaker if you want to take that project and use some of the functionality that I showed in the previous slide. I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots, but I want to save a lot of time for Emily, who's actually going to show you a very powerful demo. So here is our landing page. This is where you want to start. studiolab.sagemaker.aws. This is where you go to request your account. Okay? You request an account, you'll have to go to your email to accept it, and then you go create your account. Once you're in, you will get your project page right here. And I do want to draw your attention to a handful of assets that we are including with SageMaker Studio Lab. We're including we have direct integration that you can pull these notebooks in with a couple of clicks for AWS Machine Learning University, commonly known as AWS MLU, just rolls off the tongue, as well as dive into deep learning, D2L, we also call it D2L. And these are great lessons that millions of people have already used them to learn the basics of machine learning. AWS MLU does computer vision, NLP, it has binary trees as well as tabular data. So those are good courses to get you started on your ML journey. And then the D2L is for deeper learning. If you're doing neural networks, it's recommended you use your GPU for that because you typically use more data to train your models with the D2L models. And then down below, you'll see Hugging Face. We've partnered with Hugging Face back in earlier in the year. And they're part of our team here where we can also run their Hugging Face models with just a couple of clicks from our project page. Keep in mind, you can run any GitHub notebook, any Jupyter notebook with Studio Lab. However, we want to make these extra easy for you to get to. Then once you open your project, this might look familiar to people who are familiar with Jupyter Lab. This is your console for where you can actually open up your notebook, view it, run it. You'll have terminal access, Git and GitHub access. This is your environment to play with. So the compute is dedicated to you for your entire user session. And you'll be able to pip install any libraries that you want, not just the ones that we give you out of the box. This is completely open for you to install what you want. Like I mentioned earlier, you got 15 gigs for your project space and unlimited user sessions. You just can't have 2 user sessions going at the same time, just one at a time. And like I mentioned earlier, we save your project off for you so you can come back and pick up where you left off. Now, I want to just mention a couple of quotes here, one from Hugging Face themselves. It's a long quote, I won't read it, but what I really liked about it is the fact that they said, we've been working together, Hugging Face and AWS, to democratize ML. And we think that's important because they have a huge library of open source NLP transformer models that they've opened to the world, and we've been partnering with them to make it easier for people to leverage those models with SageMaker. We also have a handful of universities that we call them our AWS scholars. One from University of Santa Clara, Sanjeev Das, who talked about Studio Lab making it easier for his students to get going with classes. So you're not spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to set up your environment. You can get right into the lessons. We have Dan Roth from UPenn, who says something very similar about how it's going to be transformative for his students to use an easier environment to get going with. We also have a handful of AWS heroes who've also been great beta testers for us. They're great influencers out there. They have their own classes. We recommend you check it out. Keisha Williams is here in the United States. We have Cyrus Wong in Hong Kong, as well as Mike Chambers, who is in Australia. Now, with that said, the next slide is going to talk about our hackathon, so it'll be a 10-second video.
Thank you, Michelle. So, hey folks, Emily Weber, MLSA, and I am psyched about Studio Lab. Right? This is an awesome day for AWS. This is an awesome day for customers, for data scientists. We've got our hands on some compute, right? We've got some compute instances. So, the hackathon, disaster response hackathon, we are partnering with DevPost, and we're excited to announce a global hackathon. In particular, the hackathon is about disaster response, right? We've seen this on the US West Coast. We've seen this in many places around the world, whether this is a global pandemic, right, that we're all currently experiencing, or whether this is dry weather, whether this is natural disasters in many capacities. It turns out some of these problems are solvable from a data science perspective. I say solvable, I mean we can help improve disaster response. We can make it faster, we can make it more efficient for people around the world. So the disaster response hackathon is in partnership with DevPost and many organizations. We're working with experts in disaster response in a variety of capacities. And so you can sign up to participate in this hackathon. Cash money on the table here. We are offering 54,000 USD for teams who are working on this, and we're really excited about this. I have a couple examples that I can show you once we get into the demo. And so with that, we're going to check out the demo.
Oh, there's one more page.
So let's move over to the demo. Here we go. Great. So this is the dark view of Studio Lab. You'll see I have my browser set in dark mode. So as Michelle told us, we want to start by going to the link, right? So it's studiolab.sagemaker.aws. So once you go there, you're going to create an account. Once you have the account created, and once you've, again, registered your email and you're all in, you're going to have this view. Right, you'll have this page. And so your first decision is, do I want what's called a CPU or do I want a GPU? Now, for the overwhelming majority of people who are new to machine learning, maybe new to Python, new to data science, they're going to pick a CPU, right? Most people will pick a CPU. However, if you are a researcher at a university, if you are looking for some low-cost compute environments, and by that I mean free compute environments, then you can select the GPU. And so as Michelle told us, that GPU is available for 4 hours in a user session, and the CPU is available for 12 hours in a user session. Now, the good news is that you have unlimited user sessions. What that means is you can pick GPU. Your 4 hours is going to time out. You can actually log right back in again. So you can just continue. And so, yeah, so we're going to click this Open Project button right here. We also have, as Michelle said, a variety of assets. So if you are new to machine learning, if you're new to Python, new to data science, probably new to development, the first place I would start is MLU. MLU has really nice courses. They do introductory concepts for machine learning. So they'll help you understand basics like tabular data, XGBoost, scikit-learn, classification, regression, using AutoGluon. So yeah, definitely start with MLU. Once you've tested the waters with MLU, you can absolutely take the next step and go to dive into deep learning. You'll learn all about convolution and recurrent neural networks, LSTMs. You'll actually be building networks from scratch. The Hugging Face notebooks are wonderful. We're going to use the Hugging Face SDK in my demo. You can also check out blogs, and you can sign up for the hackathon all here on that page. So the next view is the UI, right? So if you've worked with Studio before, SageMaker Studio, this is going to look really familiar. If you've worked with JupyterLab, this is going to look very familiar, right? We have our notebook. You'll notice I have this in this nice little simple view, as it's called. I like this. I'm a big fan of this simple view. It just kind of makes it look a little bit more seamless there. So we've got a widget, right? This is our data widget. This is where I'm storing all of my notebooks. I'm storing all my data. I'm storing all my assets right here. I have this file here that's called an environment.yaml file. And so the way Studio Lab is going to work is we have one kernel that we're going to launch with. We have a Python kernel that's available by default, which means you're going to be on the hook for pip and conda installing everything else. So if you want CV, if you want R, if you want NLP, all of that you're going to be conda installing yourself. As you'll come to find out, we need to conda install with a percentage, actually. So if you work with Jupyter, we use a bang, right? We use the exclamation mark. In this environment, you're going to want to use a percentage sign. Anyway, you'll see that all over the place. What you can do is load in a YAML file, which you can download from our repository. You can create for your friends. You can share. And then you're going to right-click. Let's show this. You're going to right-click this YAML file. You're going to cruise up here. You're going to say build conda environment. So build conda environment. And then you're going to confirm that you want this built. We'll say, OK. We're going to open a new terminal for you. We're going to run a couple bash commands just to create that environment. Now, I already have mine created, and so that's that. So we have our notebook, and we have this Python kernel that we're using for our notebook, and life is good. But where did this notebook come from, I wonder? How do we get our hands on something like this? So for that, you can go to Studio Lab Examples on GitHub. So AWS Studio Lab Examples. We have 10 example notebooks that are custom curated for machine learning, aspiring data scientists, aspiring Python developers on Studio Lab. So that's going to include notebooks like computer vision, NLP, again, working with custom environments, doing geospatial data science, using R, all sorts of components. We also have example notebooks for the hackathon, actually, for the disaster response hackathon. So the NLP example is working on it's called the TICO-19 data set, and it's a translation of health service announcements related to COVID-19. And so that is the demo that we're going to look at today. And so let's select natural language processing, and then I'm going to pick my notebook. And right from the top, I see this link here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Open in SageMaker Studio Lab. And what happens? We move over to the environment. So you can add this link to any notebook that's hosted on GitHub. Any IPython notebook that's hosted on GitHub, you can just add the button to yours. It will render nicely in just a little bit here. But so in any case, you add the button to your notebook, and then the file renders, right? So we get this preview of the notebook that shows up in Studio Lab. And once we have the preview, we're going to say copy to project. So we're going to copy to the project. And what that means is it's copying it into our Jupyter Lab environment. And so this is going to show up. And so you have a couple choices here. You can clone the entire repository. I would recommend doing that only when you have the space for it, right? The constraint on Studio Lab is your disk space. You're going to have 15 gigs of storage. And so if you have the extra space for that, then by all means, clone the full repo. Otherwise, you may just want to copy the notebook. I'm going to cancel that out since I've already copied this through. So then we can click through this. And once it's copied, let's check it out. So in this notebook, again, I'm going to fine-tune the T5 T5 small model. So this is a pre-trained model from Hugging Face, which I'm going to fine-tune, as it's called, with the COVID-19 health service announcements. And so we're going to write a file here. We're just going to add some extra packages that we need. Transformers, data sets, a couple other components. And then right away you see that percentage sign, right? So we're gonna install those. And so we're gonna explore the data sets. So you can copy any other data set you like. In this example, we copied the English to Spanish, to Los Angeles Spanish, and then we're just gonna download that locally. So you know what? We're gonna do this. We're gonna run this live here. So I'm gonna write my requirements, and then I'm gonna pip install these. So we'll get these installed, and once these come through, we're gonna keep yours in here. So we're gonna point to our data, we're gonna wget this. So we're gonna actually copy it again locally, and then we're gonna unzip this file here. Here we go. You know what, let's restart. All right, so now that we're restarted, we'll point to the data set, and we're gonna copy this locally. So we've copied it from where it's been hosted to our Studio Lab environment, and then we'll just unzip this. So we've got our data set locally. You can use the script I put together here just to parse this TMX file, which is this, and this just makes sure that it looks nice. And so we have a source and a target data set, right? So we have the English phrases, and again, these are health service announcements that are related to COVID-19, and then we have the translation component for those, which in this case is Los Angeles Spanish. And so we have the label data set here, and I'm gonna write this to a CSV file just so that I have it stored locally. The next thing we're gonna do is we need to reformat this data set to work nicely with Hugging Face. So this specific pre-trained model that I'm gonna use just likes data in this JSON lines format. So it just prefers to see content in this JSON line. So I'm gonna put that together here. And so now I have this new file called data/train. So that is gonna be right out here. Yeah, so train.json, there we go. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna point to the Hugging Face raw file, actually. So I'm pointing to their GitHub repository. And this is a script that I'm gonna use to fine tune this model. So there are a lot of ways that you can work with Hugging Face SDK and a lot of the scripts that they've put together. This is just one way. I'm literally copying their Python file from GitHub. I'm depositing it into my local environment here, and then we're gonna run this. So this is a local script, right? This is running on my CPU, actually. I selected the CPU, and so this is gonna take a little bit here to execute. And so this is going to take 3 epochs. I set this to 3 in order to keep the runtime on the smaller side, so it won't take too long. And so this is gonna run. Essentially, we're training this model. The process is executing. Again, this is a T5 model that we're training locally. Yeah, okay. So another component that is really exciting about working with Studio Lab is you can actually connect into AWS. So if you are already familiar with working with AWS, if you're already used to managing things like keys, if you're used to managing things like IAM execution roles, if you're comfortable with that developer access into AWS, you can actually point to AWS from Studio Lab. So what works is with the AWS CLI, actually. So we're gonna pip install Boto 3. We're gonna pip install the AWS CLI. Again, we're doing that on this environment, so on this Studio Lab environment. And here's my bright red warning sign. Like, please, under no circumstances should someone commit their AWS credentials to GitHub. Under no circumstances should you do this. That is akin to taking the keys to your car and throwing it into a crowded room. Like, what happens when you do that is someone else gets access to your account. So do not do that. But what I'm actually doing here is I'm creating this little credentials file. So you'll notice it's being written to that AWS path, and I'm pasting in, again, my keys. Now, the minute I do that, I'm going to delete this cell so that I can share this notebook with someone else. But again, proceed only with extreme caution. Please only do this if you know what you're doing. After that, we're going to pip install SageMaker. And we're going to pip install SageMaker with the percentage sign. And then once I've got the SageMaker Python SDK installed, I'm going to paste in what's called my IAM execution role. So if you work with SageMaker Studio, work with SageMaker Notebook instances, you have that thing that's called an IAM execution role, and that tells the rest of your AWS account that this SageMaker resource has permissions to access all the other different components. And so what you need to do is paste in the ARN, the Amazon resource number, for that entity. Excuse me. So you're going to paste that in. Once you have that pasted in, the sky is the limit. Like, you can talk to Aurora, you can talk to Redshift, you can talk to S3, you can talk to SageMaker, you can talk to Dynamo, you can create step functions, you can execute Lambda, you can hit SageMaker endpoints. Like, really anything you can do in the cloud, you can point to from your SageMaker Studio Lab notebook. Again, it's all very DIY in the sense that you're using the CLIs and the SDKs in order to do it, but it's absolutely possible. So here what I'm going to do is I'm pointing to my S3 bucket. So I'm pointing to an S3 bucket that I've already created. This is an S3 bucket that has my data. It has other data. I'm actually going to copy data into my S3 bucket. So here, I'm using the AWS CLI to copy my local data, so that data file I just created, train.json, I'm copying that into my AWS account, actually. So now it's literally sitting in my S3 bucket, and I'll see it in the console. The next thing I'm going to do is run a training job on SageMaker, which I'm executing from Studio Lab, right? So I'm pointing to the SageMaker SDK right here. So import SageMaker. We're importing the Hugging Face deep learning container, and I'm going to add in all the same configs that I added in previously. So I have the name of my model, I have the path to my data set that I want to train, my source, my target language, all these different components. And then I also have this git config. So the git config is that same script I just used. It's just parked on GitHub. It's actually sitting on GitHub. It's not even sitting locally here. I'm just pointing to GitHub. So I pass that git config into this piece. And this is how we think about training on SageMaker. Let me just zoom in here. So if you've trained on SageMaker, if you checked out my session yesterday, if you checked out my 16-video YouTube series about SageMaker training, you'll be familiar with this concept, right? This is an estimator. And so what we do is we're going to take our scripts, right? And again, we're pointing to that script on GitHub. And I'm defining my instance config. So here, again, I have one P32XL. So I'm still going to run on some GPUs. In this case, I'm only running on one instance, but I could bump that up. Oops, on the next line here. There we go. I could bump that up right here. So if I'm trying to scale out this job, if I want to train on more instances, if I want to throw more GPUs at this, if I want to scale up my data set, I can increase the number of instances. And then Hugging Face actually is directly integrated with what's called SageMaker Model and Data Parallel, which means that when I add more GPUs, SageMaker and Hugging Face will shard my model out. So they will automatically ensure that my model is taking advantage of all of these different devices. Great, so I've got that in there. I'm defining the version of the Transformers SDK that I'm using. I'm doing the same thing for Python, passing in my hyperparameters, and then I'm going to call model.fit. All right, so I call model.fit. And then this is now executing in my cloud. This is actually in my AWS account. And so you can open up the AWS console, you can see the job running, you can see the hyperparameters, you can see the logs, you can create endpoints, you can test endpoints, And all of that is available, again, directly from Studio Lab. Please, yeah.
If I can turn my mic back on, David. Yeah, and I think the point we wanted to make with just showing the AWS CLI is, yes, it's powerful because you can link it to your AWS account if you wanted to. However, you don't have to. So if we were to pull it back and talk about the beginners for wanting to start with the AWS MLU or that sort of thing, this is not something you need to do. You can work completely inside Studio Lab. But we want to show the power because a lot of people say, oh, gee, I have an S3 bucket, or I have some data in my AWS server already. How do I actually link it to Studio Lab? And yes, once you do that, you can do a lot more powerful things like she just showed you. Rather than using Hugging Face in Studio Lab, you can actually use the Hugging Face on SageMaker, which is a lot more powerful. So I just wanted to make sure that we made that distinction.
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you. Great. And so, yeah, and so again, you can sign up for the Disaster Response Hackathon. This is fully available. This is open to the world. So you can go ahead and sign up at your leisure. And so we'll take things back to the slide deck. There we go, beautiful. Great, and so to recap, so in the demo we did a quick tour of Studio Lab. We looked at the Studio Lab examples that are available on GitHub. We looked at CV, we looked at NLP, we looked at Hugging Face. We cloned the notebook, so we actually opened that notebook directly in Studio Lab itself. And we executed an NLP with Hugging Face notebook in order to fine-tune this T5 small model. We customized that environment. We used a variety of Conda environments. We pip installed a variety of packages. All of those were available. If I sign out of my account and sign back in, all of those will still persist on my session. We trained a model with both CPU and GPU. We saved the project, and then we can save it out to GitHub. All right, so a couple of closing thoughts. Remember, Studio Lab is available to anyone who can go to this URL. If you can make it to this URL, you are going to be able to request an account. And as Michelle said, every person who is at reInvent gets priority access. So please just make sure to register with the same email that you use to register for reInvent, and we'll put you in the priority queue. Remember, one account equals essentially one, we call them user sessions, at a point in time. So when you turn it on, you're going to get that CPU user session or that GPU user session, and that's the minute your clock starts. That once the clock closes, your user session is going to exit, and so you'll just restart it when you're ready to do that. And again, that's 12 hours for CPU, 4 hours for GPU. And Jupyter Lab, right, that environment is up to you. We do recommend the YAML files. I mean, it's a nice experience. Like, you have one sort of conda build step that you execute in order to create this new kernel, and then it's just available. You can select it for really any of your projects. And again, you have 15 gigs of RAM in order to, and disk actually, to save your data. And so with that, I think we're ready for questions.
We are.
So I have so I have stickers, actually. So for anyone who asks a question, I have SageMaker stickers, and actually anyone who wants a sticker will get a sticker. But do we have any questions?
This gentleman here. Oh.
Exactly, yes, that is the primary distinction. Both solutions are running on AWS, without a doubt. The difference is that when you're using Studio Lab, you're not even signed in to the rest of your cloud, right? And then you have to sign into your cloud separately using your developer keys. Yep.
They're somewhere in camp, execution was the right model, and I'm in the 25th. How would I go back and check? GitHub is not going to provide me all of those
Right.
historical traffic. It's going to just say the roses. But how would I get the history of that accuracy? Is that something available or in the plan?
Right now, that is not available, this model versioning that you're talking about. It's an interesting requirement because this is designed for more of the beginner user. And so we have to make it, so let's continue to talk because we have to make a decision whether or not that's something we should put in SageMaker itself or keep in SageMaker because that's where it lives today, or if we should bring that functionality closer to Studio. That's a good question.
I would say, so Jupyter currently has checkpoints. So every time you save your notebook, you're saving that checkpoint. And so if you can revert to a previous checkpoint in Jupyter, then that sort of would be available. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, once teams really start to moving into, hey, I need a pipeline, I need, version control, like we absolutely see customers migrating into SageMaker. Like that's when you actually take the whole project and move it into SageMaker. We see Studio Lab like really for the fringe cases, like, in really extreme academic cases or, for people who are just getting started with Python. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, right up here. Yeah, so the CPU is a T3 medium?
Extra large.
Extra large.
Extra large, 16 gigs, yeah.
And then the GPU is a G4X, G4D.
G4D, extra
XL.
large.
Yeah. Yeah. Right now. Subject, right now that's what they are.
Gentleman over here. Yeah. Right, so once you want to start using that sort of functionality, that robust functionality that I described earlier, that's when you want to start thinking about migrating. This is a really basic scaled down version just to get people educated about the basics of machine learning and data science. But we just released, and we're listening to these requirements and to see what makes sense to make that migration.
And if you're comfortable managing your secret keys, if you're comfortable pasting in your access credentials and you're not sharing those, then yeah, you can run autopilot jobs. You can run SageMaker pipelines. Now Studio has more UI aspects, right? So in SageMaker Studio, when you create a pipeline, you get the DAG, right? So you get that whole visual experience, and you won't get that in Studio Lab. Or when you run autopilot and you get sort of all those really rich experiment results that come through in Studio, that's not available in Studio Lab. So it's really just that sort of fringe DIY case that we do see customers pointing into their AWS cloud for a variety of reasons.
Yes, it gets back to the original question, which is then you're transitioning back to your AWS environment, though.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, so the question is, if he exceeds his limit, can he start to stream his data from AWS server into the Studio Lab environment? I'll let you.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, really, once your disk is full, I would just clean it. Like it really is not a great experience. Like once it gets jam-packed, you're going to be severely limited in the basic executions that you can run. So once you've hit that 15 gig limit, start removing things. Like start deleting your files, deleting your notebooks, making sure those are saved elsewhere. You can still execute things, but definitely it's time to just purely delete. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Can you talk a little? Our frugality leadership principle. So when we give you a user session, that's yours for 12 hours, and we assume we're going to have a huge population of people who are going to want to use it as well. GPU, as most of you know, is a much more expensive compute power. So we want people to be using the system and active on the system. If you're working beyond 12 hours and you want to log in again, have at it. But we think at some point people are going to want to take a nap. With that said, you can have a training job run, and you can close your laptop. And if it's still, as long as it's within that user session, it will continue to run, even though your laptop is closed. That's when checkpointing becomes very important, like Emily was mentioning earlier, because if your training job is not completed during that 4-hour GPU time limit, you can always revert back to the last checkpoint, opposed to giving up on the entire training job because it didn't fit in the 4-hour window. Good question.
Other questions?
15 gig is compressed size, right? Is it an uncompressed? The limitation on 15 gig, is it a compressed size or uncompressed for 15 gig?
Well, it includes both. So if if you start with a larger file and then compress it, then the compressed version would be the count in terms of the gigs. Yep.
Great. It's hard for us to see up here, so if there's any other questions, or if you want to see us, is there a hand right there? If there's any other questions, or you want to come see us afterwards and get some stickers, please come on up.
And I would say follow us on Towards Data Science. We're going to be continuing to post, examples, tutorials, tips and tricks for ways to do various activities across data science, machine learning on Studio Lab. So stay tuned. There's lots more fun coming up. So thanks.
And you promised stickers, so you're going to have to deliver.
I mean, well, we've got them with your name on it. So thanks.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.